serving you a dose of wisdom and humor with a dash of radiance. Welcome to Biscuits and Sunshine with your hosts, Callie and Landra.
Hey y'all, welcome back to this installment of Biscuits and Sunshine, a podcast dedicated to living creatively and authentically. We're so grateful you're here with us today. I'm Callie.
And I'm Landra. It makes me hella happy to have you here with us today. So, love is a core value for both of us. We do our best to live with an open heart. It was something we most quickly realized when we became fast friends. Yeah, and I think about love, God, I mean, we are going to take this probably in so many different directions, and it can go. But I just think about as a kid, how often kids express, and I remember when I was little, I was like, oh my God, I love, and whatever, fill in the blank, right? It was just whatever you were just feeling at that moment in time. And it's just such a beautiful expression that, kids just say it so freely. And yeah, it's beautiful.
It's interesting you say that too, because when I think of being a kid and saying, ooh, I love this eraser, someone would always say, oh, well, why don't you marry it?
Oh, I remember this.
Right?
Yes, yeah.
And I feel like culturally, there is a lot of focus put on romantic love, and kind of we hold romantic love to be the love that we should all emulate and all move toward. But in reality, there are so many different types of expression of love. I mean, the Greeks have like 7 words for love in and of themselves. Eros, like physical, sexual love.
Passion love.
Philia, the love of friends. Agape, unconditional, sacrificial love. Philautia, the love of self-care. Mania, crazy, obsessive love. Like, I think it's helpful when you have a lot of different ways to define love, because baked within our language is an understanding that love takes many forms.
Yeah. I love that so much. I mean, I think I only knew maybe 3 types of Greek love. I didn't realize you said there's 7, 8.
Yeah. It's very multidimensional, because the love that you have within a family is different than the love that you find when you meet an adult friend.
Yeah.
It's a different love than you have with your romantic partner, or the love that you feel from a humanitarian perspective, that you want to help people you've never met, whose culture you've never experienced, who you've never even kind of had conversation with. But we know that we all share that. And I think it's very important to understand that love does indeed take many forms.
Yeah. It's interesting. When you said, talking about from the Greek perspective, it got me thinking about the difference I saw in myself after living in Latin America. And so I grew up in a family where we always said, love you. So it was always something I was used to expressing and saying. But outside of family, I don't think there is much expression of that. But then living in Argentina, it is a warm Latin culture that is about hugs and kisses. And, even if you just meet somebody for the first time, right, a kiss on, both cheeks. Or one cheek, depending on, kind of.
Or 3 cheeks in some places of Europe.
3 cheeks.
Oh, wait.
3 times, still 2 cheeks. Or what cheek, other cheek were you talking
This
about?
podcast took a turn.
No, but, and then, talk about like also connected to that, he'd always so often say besos, which is like kisses. And so then I was just immersed, and that was for about 6 months. And I just loved it. It was just like the warmth and all that. And then I came home and I started really embracing beyond my family, like my friends in such a physical way, and like the hugs and the kisses. And I was just like, oh, am I too much? Is this too much? And then it was interesting, though, to see we all have our different comfort levels with expression of love, whether it's in how we say it, but also in how we like physically touch each other. So that was interesting, too. Sometimes it's interesting to notice things about your culture, to step out of your culture, and then see things about other cultures that you might want to. Like what I've kind of adopted is like, I love that. I wove it into my being. And then, of course, coming to Greece, it just felt so natural because I'd already kind of had done that.
I think there's a lot of warmth to be shared, and something to take note of in cultures that maybe, shall we say, are described as a little more passionate, maybe a little more hot-tempered, cultures that maybe put emotions a little bit more at the forefront. I remember here in Greece, like my first year, walking down the street and hearing 2 grown men in a very sort of innocent exchange buying cigarettes at the kiosk on the corner. One man leaving yelling "Philakia," kisses to the man who was selling him cigarettes. And I thought, what a what a strange way to interact. But if this is somebody that you've been buying cigarettes from for the past 20 years, you probably do have a relationship built. And I love the fact that people feel free to express that.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And, it makes me think about, and we've talked about this, about the different love languages,
Oh, yes.
right? That book that's been out there, and maybe some of you know of it. Maybe it's new, maybe for the first time, but I don't remember if I know all of them. But it's like, how do you like to express love? And then also, how do you like to receive love? So there are quality time, words of affirmation, gifts, physical touch, and
Acts
doing,
of service,
oh, acts of service. I knew that you would have
all of them.
all of them. Um, yeah, and I think, love or being cared for or being seen, I think any of that is a really good way to kind of know about yourself.
Know about yourself, and also when you find a relationship that's important to you, also know how the other person receives love. Because I'm a physical touch person.
Mhm.
You could buy me all the gifts in the world, and you can do all the acts of service that you want, and I will be appreciative, and I will, in theory, understand that you're doing this from a loving place. But if you're not holding my hand, if you're not kissing me, if we're not in some way physically close, it's hard for me to understand that in my very core.
Mm.
And so for me, like, I think physical touch is like a very easily understood love language. Now, my definition of physical touch and how I use it in all sorts of relationship has changed and matured over the years, shall we say. But it's helpful for me because in moving here, I know that if I start to get lonely or sad, I can do a check-in with myself and say, "Oh, I just haven't hugged another person in like
Mm.
a week." For me, that's a super long time because I grew up in a very physically expressive family. We're always hugging, we're always kissing, we're always touching each other. My mom and I walk our hand in hand down the street when we're together. I'm holding my nieces and my nephew's hands. They're sitting in my lap. We're just like a family that's all on top of each other all the time. And so to make the choice to move away from that and into a place where I have really close friendships, but it's not like we're living in the same building or we're living on the same street. So we'll go days without seeing each other, especially if I'm traveling or you're traveling. Now I know I'm not lonely. I'm not depressed because there's something wrong. I just miss my human interaction. I
Mm.
miss being hugged.
You
And
know,
that's a really easy, like, solve for me. I'll
yeah.
call my aunt. I'll call you. I'll go see somebody that's really close to me. Fixed. Done.
Yeah, it's funny because I'm like, I'm ready to jump in because I remember, I think this might have been like our second or third girlfriend date. We went to the park, if you remember, Perion Tuario.
Oh,
And
yeah.
then I found, I forget, Amalaki, and we
Mm-hmm.
went and we ate and stuff. And I think he started sharing with me, like, oh, touch or whatever. And I was already feeling like, oh my gosh, I love her so much. And I was so aware that that you were away from your family and that, the pandemic, we were kind of still like, masking up and like, feeling comfortable. I think like, oh, you got vaccinated. Okay. Yeah. Okay. We can like touch. And so I remember leaving you at that corner, if you remember, and I gave you like the longest embrace because I'm not afraid to like hold anybody like close like that especially that I want in my personal space.
It
And
was
I
so
really
good.
felt that I was like, oh, this is what, this is the expression of to you. I wanted to, but I also knew like how much it would mean to you to have that.
I need that.
I forgot about that
I
until
did
you started
too.
talking about that. I'm like, "Oh, I remember that moment."
I remember that hug very vividly
Oh,
because I think it was one of the first times having since moving here, having that sort of like my love cup filled. My parents used to tell me this story about this concept of I lack. I am lovable and capable.
oh,
This idea that it's
oh,
some
and like, I like it.
it's
Uh-huh.
this parenting thing from the 80s. And what they said, the way they described it to me, my brother, is that let's say every day you start with a piece of construction paper. You go out into the world and sometimes the world tears away little pieces of that. And so when you come back home, maybe you started with a full 8.5 by 11 and you come back and it's nothing but a tiny little scrap of paper left. There are people, i.e., in this case, your family, but friends and everything, there are people that can help you refill your ILAC, help you refill this cup of I am lovable and capable. And I remember in that moment when you hugged me thinking, oh, my love cup is full. I am so content and I am so
Aw.
happy. And I think that's really important to know about yourself and to express it to your friends so that
Yeah.
they too can help you kind of work the self care angle when you can't satisfy it for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. This is taking a little bit of a turn, and I guess into romantic relationship. I'm thinking about relationships that, we've all had those moments where you're dating somebody and all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, I think I love them. Oh, I'm scared. Should I be the first one? Should I not? Especially, I don't know. It's funny too. I came to that point where I'm like, again, I have my heart tattooed on my wrist at this time. And I'm like, I want to be that person that like lives with an open heart, right? At least there's no regrets. At least I know I said it. But then I was like, oh, but what if it's not returned, right? You can kind of be that. And then also thinking sometimes from that perspective of like, should the woman be the first one to say it?
Mm.
Like all that bullshit, whatever you want to.
Whoops, expletive rating on this one.
Oopsie. Like all those little things that kind of get in the way of that. Anyhow, I decided to make the bold move and to say, I love you first. And it was returned, and that was beautiful. But then this person proceeded to say, but you know what? We shouldn't say it too often.
What?
It can become, yeah, I know, right?
What?
Because, it might like dilute its meaning, or I guess it was a rationale.
Interesting.
And I was like, I don't know if I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's like trying to put a governor on love in a way,
I
which feels
know.
totally the antithesis of what love is.
Yeah. And clearly not the man I married.
Yeah. The man you married is delightful, I will say that. I would never tell you to not say I love you.
Oh my God. He is like, yeah, again, another open hearted individual. Yeah.
That's interesting too, because when we think about this like these different words for love, we all have a different frame of reference for love. You and I grew up in really loving households, but
Yeah.
there are a lot of people in the world who don't have that experience. And so love isn't something that is easy to express, or it isn't something that feels safe. And for some people, they enter relationship, and we've all made bad decisions in romantic relationship. I don't think anyone is safe from that or that past experience.
These are
Um,
learnings and growth.
Learnings and growth. And you never know what, until you get to know someone, you don't know their experience with love. So maybe this guy had experienced the mania, the obsessive love, and was like, oh, I'm afraid to get back into that.
Mm.
Until you get to know someone, you get to know their frames of reference. I think it's like my reaction was so totally wrong. What? Why would you ever say that to someone? Maybe he had a really bad experience with love.
Hmm.
And to each their own, right? Some people express love very differently than you and I do.
Looking back, just thinking about the topic of love, like it's been a journey. I think, I don't know, personally where it happens for me. And I don't think I am separate from this, but I think as little kids, we are just so full of love and light, and we just are like, yeah. But then somewhere, like somebody broke my heart,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then you become more protective of it. And then, so I think it's been a journey, like, yeah, more into like that finding self love. And it's interesting thinking about the heartbreak that can happen with romantic relationships, how I was so good. Kind of remember I said going back on the other episode of like, I'm like, oh, the exes, I don't go backwards, we're done, we're done. But I think there's something like where I did that, like, oh, you hurt me or my heart hurt. Like, that's it. And then I would close up like a little like flower and just be
Yeah.
like tight bud and be like, I don't need anybody. And then that whole kind of rhetoric we can run in our mind as strong single women, when we get to that place of like, I don't need anybody. I got a great job. I got a great friend. I got this. I got that. But then I was like fooling myself and that's fine if like, I didn't want a relationship, but I did want a relationship.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right. And so when I came to that realization, it was like, okay, I was also the type of person that knew I'm okay being alone. And it's funny, inadvertently, I didn't do it as a way to find love. I didn't think, like it wasn't calculated, but now I do think that was a path into long-term partnership love was loving myself, but it was like through like dating myself and being okay being single and just getting to know who I am and doing the things that make me happy.
Absolutely.
So when you said that, it just made me think about that path into like, uh-oh, like I'm not lovable or the story that somehow comes up and then reclaiming that and being like, yes, I am.
Mm-hmm.
And then, yeah, I could talk for days. But anyhow, that just popped into my mind when you had said that.
Sometimes I think we forget that the heart is a muscle. And in order for it to be at its strongest, you have to continue to allow it to work. I know that from a self preservation perspective, it can feel very helpful to kind of retreat inward and protect your heart, and especially in a world that kind of is full of really sad things, like
Mhm.
tragic things. We are all sort of trying to navigate this path of protecting ourselves and also being able to kind of still live open heartedly.
Yeah.
And I think that it's really important to remember that a lot of time there is always a lesson to be learned, even through the heartbreak. And we can use all of these experiences to strengthen that muscle. It's not something to just kind of be like, oh gosh, I have to throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak.
Mhm.
This was a bad relationship, and therefore I have nothing to learn from this heartbreak, which probably isn't true.
That's a good point. You mentioned being somebody that lives so open-hearted, and I get that too. And I know we've talked about this. I'm just curious if there's been anything because the not even just currently what's going on in the world has been a sad, heartbreaking place. Without getting into all the specifics, because we can go on again for days and be on tangents. But like, yeah, how do you protect your heart but also still live open-heartedly? I'm curious what you find to be helpful.
For me, protecting my heart, I think, has to do with finding opportunities to live creatively, to allow that emotion to escape. I used to work in TV news, and I didn't do a great job of this because it got to a point where, after years of being in the news, I wasn't able to leave work at home. I mean, at work. Always brought it home with me. It was like school shooting after school shooting. It was negative after negative, and I just felt myself sort of drowning in this pile of negativity. And I found myself at the bottom of it thinking I have no creative outlet. I wasn't singing, I wasn't writing, I wasn't painting, I wasn't doing anything like that. And so I had no place for my emotion to go. So I think one way to protect your heart is to allow the emotion to get out of you.
Mm.
However, it speaks to you. You go on long walks. You take, I don't know, you hike the Appalachian Trail for 3 days. You paint. You
Is this what you do?
definitely don't hike. I can tell you that much.
I
Definitely not that
got you up the mountain
aspect.
though. You
You
hiked
did.
to
And it was
the
beautiful.
top. Yep.
Can't say it's my first
Yeah,
method
that's
of
true.
protection. But from a creative perspective, after my most recent heartbreak, I got into writing poetry. I'm not like a poem writer, but for some reason, I remember sitting at a cafe eating a cinnamon roll because that's sometimes self-care comes in the form of a cinnamon roll and a cup of coffee. And I just started writing. I just started writing, and it became love letters to myself. It was everything I wanted to say. It was everything that we had hoped for. And it gave me a place to sort of put those feelings and those emotions on paper, and I didn't have to hold them inside anymore.
Mm.
I think the holding inside emotion, good or bad, I don't think that we were meant to do that as people. We were meant to live communally and share things. And sometimes I think the modern world says, "Oh, don't be too happy, don't be too sad." And if you can't live with the extremes, you can't face those things, you don't have the tools because no one ever taught you, it gets stuck.
Mm.
It gets stuck in your body. We all know the science now says our bodies, you know, the body keeps the score, right?
Mhm. Holds
We
the record of in our tissues, yeah, of all of our experiences, if not
we have to let it
moved
out.
through them.
We have to let it out. So from a protective standpoint, I am very aware of the fact now that I have to let the emotion out.
Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned TV and media, I just social media included in that too, and just thinking about how it's always not always, but it feels like more and more, it's like 24/7, and it is around, like, where are we plugging into? And for myself, I think that actually pulls me out of my heart space.
Mhm.
And like you said it perfectly, like getting stuck and like, the overwhelming, like I don't think we're meant as humans to see all this destruction and just atrocities happening all the time. It's like stuff's on loop, right? It's not
Mhm.
even just like, oh, for this one moment you plug in, it's just all the time. But it's a fine balance because this isn't like a turning away, but there has to be like a moment in time where you do all the things like you said, but it's like this reorienting back to it to still like, stay informed and then still do a little bit of like giving back in some way that I can in my little pocket of the world
Mhm.
or, at a bigger cause, right? Like whether it's donating money or resources or whatever. But yeah, I think that's the thing I feel like I'm still a little bit in is like how do you live so open-heartedly in a heartbreaking world? I don't even think I still have all the answers, but I'm glad we're having this conversation, and I think it's something that'll probably continue to weave back into our talks.
If you had one main takeaway, a lesson from love that you have learned over the years, what
Mm.
would that be?
I mean, it doesn't matter if it feels scary, just and it's coming from a place of love. And I guess what comes with love is like good intention and it feels authentic to you. I guess not in the way that you're like, please love me, but more
Mhm.
of like a really rooted in like, I know myself, like I'm scared, but this is really like what I want, like
Mhm.
a deep heart's desire. Just do it.
Yeah, just do it.
Just
Nike
do
was
it.
onto something there.
Yeah.
I like that a lot. There's this thing that I challenge myself to do, especially when it comes to sort of dating and stuff like that, is if I think it and it's like a healthy, normal thought, then I will say it. Like if I think, oh, this man has really nice eyes, I'll say, hi, I really like your eyes. It terrifies me to no end. But I feel like to be authentic to myself, if I have this thought, I should have the courage to say it.
Yeah.
Like in the right, I'm not going to say it to a married man, clearly, but I should have the courage to say these things.
Yeah.
For me, as I've gotten older, I never put a lot of stock in this proverb around like guarding your heart because from it all things flow.
Mm.
But the older I get, the more I sort of feel like I understand a little bit of that wisdom. Because if your heart's not in the right place, it's really hard to align everything else.
Mm.
Because what do they say? The farthest distance in anybody is from their head to their heart.
Ah, yeah.
I feel like if your heart is hurt and you're not addressing the hurt, or if your heart is craving something and you're frustrated because you can't find it, I feel like you have to address that. Because from your heart, I think all things do actually flow.
Ah, such a great place to land. So we want to take some moment to thank Distance Sport Audio for all the support. And to you, our dear listener, we hope that you are enjoying this as much as we are. Please head on over to Instagram and let us know what other topics we should be discussing next. Find us at Biscuits and Sunshine, all spelled out.
American author Edith Wharton said, there are two ways of spreading light, to be the candle or the mirror that reflects it. For me, light and love are interchangeable. We hope this week you find ways to be the candle or be the mirror that reflects love into the world.
If you love what we're serving up, be sure to subscribe and rate and follow us on Instagram. This is Biscuits and Sunshine with Callie and Landra.